everybody to the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee. This is April 24th. Roll call. I'm Councilmember Risberger. I'm here. Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Carson. Here. Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Okay, did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes from the March 27th meeting? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Any changes? Any questions? Okay, great. All right, so let's jump right in here with deer management. Now, the deer management task force met last week with the DEC to review their proposal for us. Len, you were able to attend that meeting?
I was.
And we received an email today at about 12:30-ish today. Unfortunately, I don't know about the three of you, I have not had a chance to review any of it.
And I have to apologize for that. We thought we sent it on Friday,
Okay.
and there was a mistake on the email address. So we assumed it
So it
got,
never got here.
yeah, until I asked for
Okay.
a couple extra copies, then
Okay.
Harry said, yep, as soon as it gets here.
So unfortunately, I mean, we can have a discussion, but I'm not quite sure where it's gonna go today since I haven't had a chance to review it. Have you had a chance? Okay. Scott hasn't. So if you wanna give us the gist of, between you and Len, would you like Betsy to give the review?
Yeah, I
of the
think
meeting?
probably between the two of us.
And then we could, if we have any questions we want to ask, we can do that, but then I'd say it's probably going to have to wait a month. So we have a chance to review everything in the proposal.
Okay. We met with the DEC, well, we met previously before, because DEC sent us their comments on our work. And they told us they were really impressed with how much we had put into it. They also said a lot of the changes they suggested for us were verbiage. There were some specific things that we were just trying to build a case. And they were things that they said, don't worry about that. So we went through, we revised before we met them, took out the things that we felt we could live with and changed the verbiage on quite a few things. And then, just as a way of making this whole meeting more productive, we met with Mike Clark and Celinda, did I get that one right? No.
Yeah, Celinda.
Celinda Brandon from the DEC. They're from the regional office in Stanford. We went through point by point and made some revisions. And like I said, most of the revisions I think were mostly verbiage. There weren't many real changes. And they pretty much said, yeah, that's, a culling program is probably going to be the only thing that's really going to work.
This is probably, just from my notes, Betsy, I have timestamp pictures taken to see the changes happening within our woods. That was, I'm not sure if it was enclosure or exclosures.
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 It's kind of a funny word,
Okay.
yeah.
That would needed some inclusion, and then do not feed the deer, New York State law, and that was talked about quite a bit, that we wanted to kind of grab hold of that and really start promoting that more and more, because we know of people that are still feeding the deer within the city of Oneonta. So, and I, to be honest with you, I didn't know that it was against the law. I know it wasn't recommended, but
When we had spoken with the DEC earlier in the fall, it was my understanding that if we saw people that were feeding deer, if we gave them a call, they would make a friendly visit to those people and, do an educational piece with them, but with a warning. If you continue to do it, there will be consequences. when we had this meeting, it was like, no, we don't do that.
Well, they don't have the ability to ticket, I would assume.
Well, that's what they originally had told us, that they did, but apparently either they don't want to.
They can fine,
Yeah.
the department can fine.
It almost feels like, because I know you, Dave, have talked to people who feed.
Oh, yeah.
And Lynn, you said you had spoken to people, and you have, and I know I have. My neighbor did stop feeding the deer, but, you know,
So-
it's not gonna be good enough. It's not good enough. And
So-
we had an article in the paper about, we wrote an article in the paper about the hazards and the danger to the deer themselves for feeding.
So the DEC, so we're saying two different things here, though. That the DEC can fine, I'm sorry,
There's a $250 fine.
I'm sorry, your name is?
David Shear, live at 30 Woodside here in the city.
Okay. Are you part of the?
No. I'd like to be.
Okay.
Come on over.
Scooch down.
So,
We're inclusive.
so they said, the DEC said that they will not come out and,
Pretty much,
Ticket.
wasn't that?
I thought we were referencing towards code enforcement at the time, that there was something in delineation difference between the code enforcement officer cannot give a ticket. Is that how we were?
Well, they kind of said they weren't going to do it, so then we were trying to brainstorm how we could, and,
I think it was
Karen
under
said
the
that
public
wasn't
health
what we
law.
Enforcement typically does not enforce environmental conservation.
It's extremely difficult
Yeah.
to prove that someone is doing it. That's why they probably said, we don't like to ticket. I mean, how do you prove something unless you catch them in the act, videotape it?
Right.
But I've spoken to Mark previously. I've got 4 neighbors, and I've approached them, and the response is baffling to me. I saw one woman feeding deer, just when you see 4 or 5 deer in your backyard and they suddenly run to someone's porch, right to the porch, right up to it. I happened to be in the backyard this time, and I just said to her, you know that's illegal. And her response was, I know. That's the difficult part. People don't understand whether they don't know that it's illegal, they don't understand what they're doing to the deer population. And I printed out a DEC notice about feeding deer, and I knocked on her door. She didn't answer the door because I'm sure she knew it was me. And I left it in between the door. Whether she read it or not, I don't know. But I've got 4 neighbors right out my back door that all feed the deer.
And our article really talked about the biology of the deer's belly.
Yes,
or
they
chamber
can't
bone,
digest it.
and that their eating habits are dependent upon the season, what's
Exactly.
in season. If they eat the wrong thing at the wrong time of year, 1, they might not digest it,
Right.
and 2, it might actually cause them to be sick.
To be sick.
And starve.
okay. I want to have a conversation here amongst the council members. Do you have anything else that you want to present from that meeting, Betsy, to us?
Do you?
No, I think it's just, nothing basically changed. It was just some details that we corrected or changed the wording a little bit. I don't think anything has basically changed since what you've read.
Well, I think they also suggested promoting hunting deer in the regular deer season. That was one
Yeah,
of the
well,
other
there-
notes that I had.
There was
City-
some clarification about DMAPs and DDP, the
Right.
different types of permits.
That's right.
That's
And-
true.
And asking the city to be one of the licensing agencies for city land to encourage, there's a permit, I think it's the DMAP. At any rate, it's the one that says that if the DEC says, yes, there is a nuisance population, overpopulation in this area, you can get 2 extra doe licenses. And once you get your 2 deer, we'll come back and we can give you more. And that if we use some of the city land that's just on the outside, that might discourage some of it will help some. It won't help completely, but it will be a help to have fewer and fewer deer coming in.
So what is the DEC, and I'll get you to, I know you want to have a question. You know, what, go ahead, I can hold my question. Do you have a question for Betsy?
Yes, but go ahead.
The only question I have is, what is the DEC recommending the city do at this point? Are they giving any specific recommendations? Because I know there's a lot of different things that they've talked about. Is there one in particular? Or are
They're
they
not
saying
going to
all of them?
recommend, but they were accepting of our proposal. So I don't think they recommend, one way or another,
Okay.
but they,
They thought your proposal was sound.
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Okay.
everything we have in there. And, you know, they did,
What was your
as you know, in the last meeting, talk about making sure we educate about mitigation efforts, which we have really tried to do and will continue to do, but also saying that's not enough.
Okay.
But it's important, but we need the other as well. And they've really agreed with that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay, jump ahead. So I have not read the updated proposal, of course, I was working
Yeah.
today, and we'll look forward to reading it. My takeaway from the last meeting with the DEC was that they wanted the proposal to make sure that it had very actionable steps
yeah,
leading up to a recommendation of culling.
Yep.
And that they would only approve a culling permit, which is a special permit that we can pull to be able to cull within the city limits. Perhaps I'm not using the right word with culling,
No,
but I
it's
think that's what
fine.
we know we're talking about here. But there need to be kind of an actionable plan with an implementation timeline and with kind of measurable results to be able to show, see, we've done these things and it's not working. Is that still the DEC's position?
well, what happened was they didn't get all of our information
Right.
when they went through.
Right.
So
Which
when
is why
they
we
had.
sent them back to me to get.
Right.
So when they had everything, when we sent them everything that we had submitted to the click, they were, oh, okay,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
And their recommendations were things that were actually in, like some of our ways of,
Mitigation things.
yeah, of mitigation. We have all those in our plan.
Right, so I guess then maybe more specifically what I'm asking is that, are you suggesting we've already enacted a plan and we are ready to apply for a culling permit? Or are you suggesting that we need to enact the plan and the proposal and then measure it and then move forward with a culling permit if needed?
I think
No.
we're ready for the culling.
Right. And I would say that the DEC agreed when they saw our proposal in full and what the efforts we've made and the things that we've tried already, they agreed that there's enough evidence that those mitigation efforts are not gonna do any more than what they've already done.
Okay, that's what I was just trying to be
Yes,
clear about. that.
exactly.
Obviously,
We're at the
we need to
point.
make sure that
Yes.
that if we're gonna do this, they're the one that need to approve
Yeah.
it. We need to make sure that we've kind of dotted every I and
Yeah.
crossed every T and
Exactly.
leading up to that.
Mhm.
So that if that's the
Exactly.
will of the task force and the council, and I don't know if this is something we voted upon, but that we're able to move that.
Well, let me just check. I mean, you know, we've all been going through this so much. Lynn, did you hear the DEC saying that they would issue those permits if the city asked for them? Did you understand that they would agree to that?
I don't remember us getting that specific about the application. I know that they will do it, but I don't know if our conversation got to that point. I know in the beginning, they really wanted to talk about the do not feed the deer. That was, the disclosure, which I forgot to look that up, but, and then how do we quantify how many deer are actually in our city today?
I can tell you what's in my backyard.
Yeah,
And mine.
I mean, I moved there 15 years ago. and we-
Hold on a second.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Right now, this has got to be a conversation between the council and the
Okay,
Deer
fine,
Management
sure.
Task Force. You're more than welcome to listen,
I
and
wish
if you have
I
any
was here
questions,
the
I
last
will,
word.
since I didn't open this up to the public
Sure.
beforehand, when we're done
Understand.
here, I'll open it back up to
Sure,
the floor,
great.
so any questions can be asked.
We, they recommended that we use a program through Cornell called Avid, which is, we already had that in our proposal, which looks at things like, that's something that citizen scientists can do, where you go and you observe the browse lines, you target certain plants in certain areas, and you note the growth, you can take photos with your phone with it, but we've already, they didn't realize that that was actually in our proposal, but that was what
They have never said that we needed to count the deer, if that's what you're
and they
asking.
told us not to count them.
There's
Yeah,
no way.
There's no way, we
no,
talked
there's
about
no
that
way
at
to do
length,
that.
there's no
It's
way
the
to
effects
quantify
of their
that.
behavior that we
Right,
look at.
right. I remember that from the original
Yeah.
proposal.
And just to go back to, would they approve the culling? We didn't pin them down to that because that's not for us to do. That's for you guys and the council to do. So what we did was, we just made sure that everything we prepared and we're ready to present to you and then wherever that goes next was complete. And
Okay.
that was what we got from them. And that they were like, yeah, that's, everything you're saying is right.
Did Susan have an opportunity to create that map? She had talked about Thursday that there was other parcels, 250 feet, because that was the number we specifically put in with DEC, they said 250 feet.
Right.
So did she create that map?
I don't think
I don't
she's
know.
had an opportunity to do that yet.
Right.
We met on Thursday, this is Monday. Again, we don't wanna get ahead, that's not our job. Our job is, collecting information, doing the research, and making a proposal. And, once we're at that place, that map has to be done.
Yeah, she
There
did.
she is.
Oh,
Susan, did you hear your name?
I actually did. I can sit down with you in front of a computer and do that. Our committee didn't want to be the ones to create the map with locations, because we're not the ones who are going to be doing the work, but we certainly know how to look at a map, and I can show you like how to measure things, and it's kind of, you'd be surprised with how many locations that have potential to be sites for the participants to do this plan. Right up the stairs.
So Glenn, you're thinking about having a map made that would show us?
Susan had mentioned that, because in my brain, I was thinking more like in Mark's backyard from Hillside Commons, whatever city land is that way, headed towards the airport. I know there's 1,000 acres, give or take, that the city owns. That's kind of where I was thinking. Susan was pointing out that there's surprisingly more parcels in the city of Oneonta, that there's that 250 distance. I could think of the 2 acres the city owns a block away from me off of Park, but
I can think of multiple backyards that have lots of room,
Yeah.
that could happen too. But that's also something that,
I think this committee would
Yeah.
probably need to dive down into and take a look at.
or once it's something that is approved through, if we approve it through the full council, that's something that could be worked on, as we develop the program also.
So you would want to put that on the coordinator, because there's like one person that's going to be in charge of this program, the coordinator, and that person's got to get selected.
Well, it may not be just city property that this is done on, and if you have multiple people through the city that say, hey, like my backyard is a great location, it may be a matter of that coordinator going out and just doing a site review of it, to make sure that it falls in line with all the rules that we put in place.
And I believe the DEC also mentioned about partnering with SUNY Oneonta and Harvard College and creating that
Right.
relationship, because then there's a lot of land.
Right. So, do we have any other questions for the task force right now? Okay, so I want to close this part. Before we have any other final discussion, I'm going to open it up to anybody else that's viewing here. If they have any questions or statements they want to make, feel free.
I do.
So just state your name and again where you live.
David Shear, 30 Woodside Avenue in the city. Like I said, I moved in there about 15 years ago. I was also a hunter for 30 plus years. Went to Paul Smith Scout, I was familiar with Paul Smith's for forestry and range management. So I'm pretty good working background of the ecology of the deer population. When you move into a place and you see the occasional deer, 15 years ago, I would see 1 or 2 a week. Now I'm up to 20 plus a day. So Mississippi State University is one of the, probably the most well-renowned university for doing deer ecology. They have a deer lab on the university. They put out this graph, and they took 2 bucks and 2 doe. That's the 0 point. And after 5 years, there was 100 deer. That's normal growth. That's okay. This exponential jump is after 10 years, because each, I don't know how much the committee knows. Like I said, I wish I was here for all the meetings, but at a certain stage in deer's life, a 1-year-old buck can service, so you know this, 1-year-old buck can service 10 doe. 2-year-old buck can service 25. Each of those does their service gonna produce at least twins, sometimes 3 and 4, but almost always twins. So you can see the exponential growth. We're at that point. We might be past that point. We're on the vertical side of that graph right now. My worry is, and I understand from talking to Mark that, you know, these things grind along and they take time. But when someone says, you know, next month or 6 months or a year out, you're gonna turn these neighbors in my backyard who think it's cute to feed the 5 deer, they're gonna have 30 deer in their backyard in another year or 2. Then they're gonna be coming to you saying, oh, we gotta do something. Well, you should have stopped feeding the deer. Plus you're harming the deer population, physically harming them.
Yep.
And when I read the stats about the tick population, the Lyme disease had gone up, the car accidents had gone up. In a normal situation, if the deer are in the woods, when they get to this exponential curve on the graph, the food supply runs short. Nature takes its course and the deer population drops. When they're getting fed in the winter, and you're talking about going in the woods, they're bedding down in my backyard now,
Yeah.
which is
Oh, yeah.
totally abnormal behavior.
Yep.
And this last rutting season, I saw a spike horn, a 4-point, and a 6-point in my backyard at the same time. You'll never see that in the wild, ever. So behavior's becoming abnormal. It's, to me, right now, it's out of control.
Oh, yeah.
It's not what do we do next year, what do we do the year after. It's some things, I mean, I'm all fully on board with the culling program. A little leery of what I read about the crossbows. I have friends who bow hunt. I was a long rifle and shotgun hunter, but plenty of friends who bow hunt. It's really difficult to take down a deer with 1 shot with a crossbow. My worry is the crossbow program, you shoot a deer in somebody's backyard, or if you got 2 acres behind you, that deer's gonna run when
I
it
think
gets
the
shot.
traps are gonna be baited though. They're gonna be baited, it's not gonna be real hunting. What a hunter would call hunting.
Well, wait, let's
Yeah,
not, let's hold the
stand-
conversation.
Yeah, even standing, if it's an baited trap, it's difficult at best to bring a deer down. You know, rifle, yes. Oh, so where we go with this?
Well, I think that's gonna be something
Yeah.
that we're gonna have to have discussion about. So
Right.
your concerns are the same concerns we all have.
Right, okay.
All right,
Dave, may I just say one more thing in terms of timelines?
yeah.
Especially tracking on what he has said about growth.
Right.
August is when we apply for these permits for January. So, and given, you know, when you have to wait a month, you know, every time to get
If you get
questions
past August, you're
answered.
going to next August.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
assume, yeah.
exactly. So I don't know
So
if
it's
you're
just
aware.
the month of August, or is there a
That-
specific date?
I think it's just the month it's not a very long period of time when you can apply.
We can check with that.
We'll get that for
So
sure.
that's
We'll
from the
get that back to you.
DEC, those permits, okay. If you could check on that for us.
Mhm.
We can do that.
Kathy, one more thing about that is that, when is that window? Is there a window there that they?
That I'm not sure about. I just know that we've been hearing that August is when you have to apply for January.
January
Which says to
approval.
me it's a short term, but
Right.
I don't know that for a fact.
Okay,
We can get the dates too.
that'd be good.
And then it's SHEER?
SHEARER, shiver.
And you said 35 outside?
30.
30?
Yeah, I've got, it's 33, I've
You
got
sound
a
like
large lot, 160 by 220 feet. So there's plenty of room in the backyard to feed, and there's plenty of room in the side yard where there's trees. And literally, I can wake up in the morning, there's 8 deer bedded down. They never went back to the woods. They come to my property, go down to Silver Creek to have water, come back, and the process just repeats every day. But like I said, it went from a few deer to now
Yeah.
easily over 20.
Well, given
And I'm
your,
not seeing the same deer. I hear people say that. I'm retired, so I'm home all the time. I can see the first pack of 6 or 8 go through, and then the other ones come up and go through, and it's just, yeah.
I also see if you're gonna talk about speeding on Spruce Street, there are herds of deer that go down, and I keep waiting for that to happen on Spruce Street.
Yeah.
I
All right.
live there and I see it.
I'm gonna close the conversation here, so we can have a conversation up here. Thank you everybody for your comments and your information. I think what's gonna happen is we're gonna do another read-through of everything that was sent, and we'll bring it back next month. I think we all realize we're on a timeline here for this.
Can I just say, if you have any questions, once you've done the read-through, if you could let us know, so
Sure.
that we're prepared, you know.
Yes,
Yes,
what we
they
can
did
do
that
is if
last
we have any
time.
questions, I can compile them from the
Right.
committee and I can forward them on to Betsy.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
when you did that before, that was
Yeah.
great.
Okay,
Thanks.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just one, yeah, just one more. Can I get, like, information, phone
Yeah,
numbers?
yeah, come on
Oh,
down.
come on, okay, we can do
Come on,
that.
we'll sign you up.
Yeah, sure.
And I would confirm everything that David said
Appreciate
about
the call.
the deer, because I have that in my backyard as well, where any given day I can find 5, 6 of them up in my area, and on Normal Ave, there's another family wandering through.
thank you.
So, is everybody in agreement that at this point we should probably review what was sent again and bring this back next month with the goal to hopefully get our questions answered beforehand, and then maybe look and see if it's something that we can forward on to the council? I think what we're looking for is more of, I'll have to confirm with Dave Merzig, we're not looking to make an actual piece of legislation, it's more of a resolution, isn't it?
Certain about that, it might be something to allow.
Some of it will have to make some changes to the code to allow the activities.
Right.
Okay. So,
Plus, we have to create the position.
Can we pass this to Dave at the same time?
I think we just found our coordinator.
You jump at the opportunity of that.
I thought that was gonna be a challenge to find the coordinator after reading this document. I think we just found the coordinator.
cross your fingers.
As long as he-
Scott, you were starting to say something?
I would send the document to Dave at the same time, see if there's any questions with those questions of what we have to do.
Well, I
So
think-
everything came back at the next meeting, so we could try to get it bundled up to get it to the council.
Right, I agree with that. At this point, we've been kind of addressing this for a while. We want to have it in close to best shape to be able to bring forward to council after the, is it June now? No, May meeting. To be able to push that forward. And then we would be able to presumably vote on it late May or early June, which gives time to be able to apply for the permit if it needs to be in by August.
How about this? We have the proposal, nobody's read it yet, the new
Yeah,
copy.
proposal.
Why don't we review it? I'll compile any questions that we have. Hopefully we'll get those answered right away from the committee. If that looks all right, then we can then forward that to Mr. Merzig before our next meeting. And that way we at least get it going sooner than later.
Right.
How's that sound?
So, yeah, that's fine. But what's your, I think Mark, maybe David, you asked this, is there gonna be a step-by-step program? Betsy's right, that's not what's been handed back over to us, it's not a step-by-step program. So if we feel that we need to get that program in place, that's something that this committee's gonna have to do, meaning, like what they.
Step by step, as in let's try literature first and then.
Or is it simultaneously?
I think we need to think about simultaneously, but that was, my concern was, is that it wasn't a step by step, and that's why I heard from DC last time, they wanted to have this in place, and I mean, I recognize they've been doing minor studies, but it hasn't been a kind of minor type thing, and we all have, but it hasn't been a major concerted effort. I didn't know if that was gonna be something that was gonna halt a permit application, because we haven't done all these things, and I thought it was data driven, but. correct?
Well,
We haven't allowed anybody to hunt on the city property, which when we were doing the Zoom meeting with the DEC officer, he was like, you know, that would be a great first start. You know, you have a deer issue, right, Carrie? I'm pretty sure that's what he was saying, is get,
It was, but we have a portion of the reservoir property that's set aside and permitted for deer hunting. So
Right.
that's where I don't wanna say confused, but I was a little thrown off because we do allow it in certain areas outside of city limits.
yeah, I mean, he talked about how they had to give warnings or issues, whatever it was.
Yeah,
To people that got caught hunting on city property, and he was kind of chuckling about it, like, you're talking about that you have a deer issue, well,
yeah.
why don't you let people hunt on your land to start with? So that simultaneously, I think you gotta do that.
well,
I don't know what this disclosure is.
Just if we could, if we're gonna let hunt the property, we really need to have a really focused, we just don't hunt the property, because as a mountain biker who rides a lot of that
Correct.
property, we really make sure that everyone knows when it's closed down, because that's a no-wing shot.
yeah.
Correct.
So,
That's why I keep asking for this map, because for me, I think for everybody in the city to be on the same page, that map would help us know that these are the areas in 2023, 24 that we're looking at doing this program.
Well, maybe we want to have that map made once we have a coordinator, and the coordinator can work with the city, rather than try to come up with this map now, or have the Deer Management Task Force come up with a map now.
I'm sorry, I'm cutting off.
But the other thing I just wanted to mention was that we're looking at, was it January to March of doing this?
Well, no, they went on to talk about why don't you allow deer hunting on city property during
Yeah,
normal
that's-
season. That's,
I got it.
you're the D map.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to separate out, is to say that I think what Len's talking about is allowing already places where we can
Oh,
allow
I see
hunting
what you
on
mean,
existing
yeah.
property, that we allow more of it, versus a culling program that would focus on particular spaces that we need to have a map to identify where those would be. Those are two separate types of things.
Dave,
Yeah.
so actually, I think one thing that we could probably do to speed some of this along is, I don't know if we'll get what the Deer Management Task Force wants done before to be able to meet the August deadline. But I think what we could get ready is opening up some of the city land for regular hunting, for the regular hunting season that's gonna come up.
And when is
Yeah.
deer hunting season? I have no idea.
There's something around Thanksgiving, right?
No, just after
Just before?
Thanksgiving, November.
It starts
Bow
It
season's
goes off
before
bow, and then it
Thanksgiving.
goes black powder, and then it goes
I'm sure
to.
Carrie's got it already looked up.
But, yeah, it progresses, but I think that gun starts 28th. I thought,
Yeah.
Something around
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
So it's in November.
Yeah, so I think we could, that's a tangible thing that we could get done between now and that, to open city land up. I'm not sure we're gonna meet the August deadline for the special permits that get handed out in January. It's a good goal to try to, but I don't think we're gonna have the person in charge, all the fine, as Mark says, the T's dotted, or the T's crossed and the I's dotted before then, but that, I think that's something that we could really move towards.
Okay. I would agree on that. I did want to go back for a second and talk about the different steps they were talking about taking. And I just wanted to remind everybody that those steps about educating the public, and I think the other one was potentially allowing 8-foot fences being put up everywhere. We already allow 8-foot fences to be put up in the back and I believe side yards, not front yards. So I think that would be a hard push to try to get a front yard 8-foot fence barrier to make that allowed in the city. But the education, we've been doing education off and on for the last 10, 15 years. I remember when John Nader was here, we were talking about it. Not feeding the deer, and also there's different sprays and things you could do to keep deer away from your whatever you're trying to grow, whether it's plants or vegetables, and it doesn't work.
and I don't disagree, what I heard from DC, and I'd like to see what the application is that we might need to demonstrate that we've done these things, that we've taken these steps. We've had concerted campaigns, we've done this, we've done that. So I think to Scott's point, it can be a kind of interim step to address it in our property. I think we need to know what that permit looks like and what it's gonna involve, because we might need to really spend a lot more time either as a committee, or a task force to look at the data in terms of what we've done and be able to pull it all together. So when we put together an application, it shows the full array of things. Not to say that their proposal, I see the proposals to us, I don't know if it's appropriate for a DEC, or all of it is appropriate for a DEC application perhaps. So I think we need to understand what we're looking at.
Okay.
And also, are we at the point, if we've done the marketing, are we to the point of enforcement then? Right?
The marketing of,
If we've done the marketing of the programs, Don't Feed the Deer, are we to the point of enforcement now?
Right.
What is that next step?
Right, exactly, right. So
and
have we
who,
done that?
well, and who actually does it? Because it's not gonna be the code office. I'm not sure that the police will do it either. The police will go and talk to people. And now we know that the DEC has said that they won't do it. They don't have the staff. Maybe they're allowed to do it, but they don't have the staffing to do it. So,
I don't know, but see, I don't remember them saying that specifically, that they won't give a ticket out. Did they do?
They didn't.
They didn't. I didn't
I
think.
didn't hear that part.
I
I
don't
heard
remember
them say
hearing
they were
that part
extremely
either.
I didn't
busy,
remember them
but-
saying that they would though either.
I thought we talked about the code enforcement office didn't want to do it. That was a lengthy discussion.
And the
I
ability
don't
to
remember them saying
enforce
that
it,
the
yeah.
DC wouldn't do it, because they gave references of where they actually did give people tickets for feeding the deer, so I think they do. I think David brings up a good point that Joe Citizen has a video of neighbors feeding deer. It's time stamped. You know, how much more proof do you need now? I don't want to turn neighbor on neighbor, but if these people refuse to stop feeding the deer, to David's point, you're doing more harm to the deer population than you're doing good. You might think you're doing good, but you're actually doing harm.
So are we saying that we want to have a coordinated official education program? And if so, are we talking about doing that simultaneously with everything else that we're looking at?
I don't see where it hurts to reinforce what people may or may not know. I mean, I honestly didn't know that it was against the law to feed the deer. I always knew it wasn't recommended.
I don't, I'm sorry, Linda. I don't think calling alone is gonna work. I think we're gonna have to do more education alongside it. We're gonna have to continue to do it. I mean, because if we call and then we continue feeding, we just backfill in with everybody, all the deer that are out there. This is an easy place to live.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have to do simultaneous. You're always gonna have to do the public information aspect of everything. I mean, look how often we do it in the fire service. I mean, everybody knows change your smoke batteries 10 years, but we still had to go out all the time to reinforce it.
Just to
So,
get people to go to a meeting, you gotta,
yeah.
you gotta tell them at least 2-3 times. Right? So.
Is that hinted me?
No, I mean, just human nature now. We're to the point where I just had someone over the weekend, hey, remind me that I'm going to pick you up for church. I'm like, really? I got to remind you that I'm going to pick you up for church. Okay, not happening.
Okay, so I think I've got everything. I've got sort of a direction we're going here. Let's review the proposal. Send any questions that you have about what's in there to me. I'll compile everything and send it to Betsy. Let's hopefully do that in the next few days. I think we should be able to do that in the next few days. I'll send it to Betsy and CC everybody so we're all in on that. And once we get that back, if we don't need to make any changes to the proposal, we'll send it to Dave Merzick. I seem to think though, from the little that I looked at what was sent, it seems like it's a proposed program and proposal. There are two different things that are there, so I want to look at that a little bit more closely. And there's nothing that says that we can't tweak what's being proposed too. If we feel like if it doesn't say enough about education or the education piece, we can just add that in. So, okay. Sound good?
Yeah. Just to keep this on our agenda so that the time and constraint is looked at all the time I would suggest if we're, by the May meeting or the June meeting at the latest, we should be asking DEC, do we have to have the entire program in place before we're allowed to apply for the permit? Because I honestly, from sitting in Thursday, I don't know what you need to have to apply for that permit. And I wouldn't want to lose that opportunity. We don't have to enact the permit, but I wouldn't want to lose that opportunity if August is the cutoff date.
Well, the other thing, yeah, because if we have nothing passed through the council, I don't know how we would apply for the culling permit anyway.
I just don't know what's needed to apply for it.
Yeah, that's what I said. I think that one of the biggest tangible goals is we can look at our property, open it up for regular hunting season as we're trying to make this goal for
Right.
August.
Yeah,
August is tight. To be honest with you, looking at everything, August is gonna be real tight.
I would be leery about applying for the culling permit. I mean, depending on what they say, I'd be leery about us applying for that until the council has actually passed something, because I think, it could look really not so good for us publicly if we end up doing that. I understand the time constraint, absolutely. But I would worry about that. I think Scott's proposal and Len's proposal about opening up the city land to hunting season though is a much more, a quicker thing that we can get done like immediately.
And if you can get Harpic and SUNY Oneonta to partner with us, that would help
Yeah.
also.
Well, we can ask. Can't hurt.
And to Len's point, so maybe some casual conversations with DC as well to understand, I mean, I'd like to understand the whole culling application in general.
Yeah.
Is it a one-shot deal? Is there, can you apply multiple years? Is it kind of like a grant system where, you know, if you're rejected once, it starts stacking the deck against you? I think we need to understand, you know, maybe as much as possible the application process so that we were able to have the best application rather than have holes in it and then be shot down immediately.
I definitely got the sense that they were gonna work with us
Oh,
throughout the entire process.
But I also think that, you know, if it goes to council and passes and you're ready to do that, I really think they'll work with you to make that happen. But there was a lot of literature that we had to get through to understand these different permits. And, you know, I think we finally have a better sense of it, but they'll be able to walk the city through exactly what has to happen.
Because there's a DEP permit and there's a DMAP permit. And-
Both have to be pulled?
And, well, therein lies the confusion, because even the committee members were getting that reversed, so there's definitely needs to be clarity on that as we're moving forward.
It's not always easy to understand, but there's also a way for just a personal, an individual hunter to get extra doe permits during regular hunting season.
All right, so unless anybody has anything else they want to add to this, why don't we move on to honorary street naming policy? Did everybody get a chance to review what Mr. Merzick sent us? I'm trying to bring this up here. There we go. Okay. Thoughts, questions, comments?
So my one question I have was when he said that, you know, we don't really need to have like a ordinance or whatever, we can just do it like the council, like it's been. Is that what we wanna do, is keep it like at a council? I know we're talking about trying not to put people in positions, like if you had 6 people come for you to like an application and stuff, but just, he happened to mention that, and I just wanna make sure that we're all on the same page, yes, we want this or no. You know what I mean?
Mark, you have
No,
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
look at the.
My-
I
I think, I mean, what he sent us was an ordinance. I would prefer an ordinance, at least it gives us a roadmap of how to do this in the future. Because we didn't have anything, and I'm glad we didn't jump at it. Len's the one that put the brakes on this, and I think that was a good idea. And But I also don't think this is something that's really gonna be utilized that often. But we've made sure that it's not necessarily utilized that often. I wouldn't want the floodgates to suddenly open and everybody trying to, you know, put their grandmother on an honorary street name everywhere. But I think this is really straightforward.
The only amendment I would like to suggest
Sure.
to it is the money aspect of it. We're asking for an application fee of $100, and then if we turn the page over to number 4 of the application procedure, it says that the individual will have to deposit funds up to or not exceeding $300. I thought we had said we were going to include the application $100 towards the cost of the sign, no?
I think that might have been brought up. I don't think we ever finalized it. I mean, I don't know about you guys, I'm completely able to move on the money aspect of it.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well.
Yeah.
At least that's why I visualized in my head when we were talking about it, was that 100 would roll forward.
Rolls over,
Right.
Well,
That the whole,
I
the
think
total
this-
cost would be not to exceed 300.
Correct.
Like a down payment, whatever you want to call it.
well, I think what Chris said, the signs were roughly a little over 200.
I thought we did 500. In my notes, I had 500. I don't know if I just miswrote something. It's 500, no, it's 500 to make sure we cover the cost, but 100 of the application fee rolling over, so it brought it down.
Well,
That's,
Chris-
but I could have miswrote.
Chris was thinking, since we print our own signs, that they're a little over $200 a pop to do this. I mean,
Because on the side of my note, it said, on my notes that I took, it said that we're using that as the money as a way to discourage as well, because we didn't want to get over.
we did. I remember having that part of the conversation. I mean, we could say, how would we say this? Resolution to approve proposed honorary streets is adopted, and the party requesting the dedication shall deposit funds equal to the cost of the signage minus the
Application fee?
application fee, but then why have an application fee? Because if they're denied it, they're gonna get their application fee back. Because we already talked about that. You could just say not to exceed $200.
Or an application fee of $300, which, then if it gets approved, it covers the cost of the sign.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have,
You can permit, I see what you mean, yeah, well,
we just do it that way, whatever the monetary is. Then you don't have to worry about giving it back or whatever, unless it gets denied, then they get it back, but,
well, then as the cost of making signs goes up, which inevitably it will over decades.
yeah.
Then the application fee can just change, unless there's a restriction to what an application fee.
I'm not sure if this was to become part of the city's code, it wouldn't just say like most of our other fees do now, fees set time to time by the common council, something like that. Rather than putting $300 in the code and having to change the code 5 years from now or 2 years from now, and then the amount changes, it's just a fee that's set from time to time, which ends up being the annual fee schedule.
So the fee schedule.
Based on whatever.
That makes a lot of sense, because then that can be, debated by the council and independently, and, if there's a big run on things, then you can change accordingly.
And maybe I missed it, I don't see right here where it says that the application fee will be reimbursed if it's not
If it's rejected.
approved. Did you read that? Or right?
I thought we did, I know
It's
we
in
talked
sub
about it.
3,
What is it?
sub 3 of D. It's one of the last sentences, I think.
Oh, sorry. Yep. Right. And the purpose of that is.
Okay. So people aren't applying for a street, because we could end up having 10 names. I mean, we won't, but let's say we have 10 names for one or two signs. You don't wanna be charging people $100 to throw their name in a hat. We just thought that wouldn't be fair. So we thinking erase 4 completely and change under D1, with an application fee that, how do we want to change that? Oh, wait a minute, I can't change this up here.
My,
Is this a PDF? This is a PDF. Do we have a hard copy there?
so my thinking was is that Greg wasn't suggesting that we eliminate number 4, sorry to speak for you, Greg, but that we were just simply kind of adding the language to say that it would be consistent, or it would follow the fee schedule set by the council. So we maintain it, the language, $100, well, actually, we can put it, change it both places, $100 fee for applying, and whatever the fee is for cost of the signage.
Right, you can put an application fee as determined from time to time by the common council where that language is. It's
Right.
everywhere else in the code, and do the same thing where it says 300, now instead of saying, dedication shall deposit funds equal to the cost, you say shall deposit funds equal to an amount set by the common council from time to time, wherever that language is.
Well, if we're gonna put the cost of the sign, if we're gonna make the application fee be the cost of the sign, so change, like what Scott was suggesting, change the 100 application fee to a $300 application fee, then we would not need 4. That's why I'm saying we could
Oh,
eliminate 4
gotcha.
completely, and then you put what Greg was saying, change that in D1, where requests from the public for honorary dedications shall be submitted in writing to the city clerk with an application fee of $100 in accordance with the following criteria. So, of course, then it would be a solid 300. It wouldn't be just the cost of the sign, if we went that route.
But I think the suggestion is that this is gonna stand in our codes forevermore.
Right.
By wrapping it in.
Well, that's why we would say, under D1, that's where we would put, let's say, with an application fee that is equal to whatever's set in the fee schedule every year by the county council. Rather than have it in D1 and in 4, two different items. But I guess it would depend on, are we having an application fee? Like, what do we want to do here? It's just, are we talking one fee to cover the cost of everything? Or are we still talking an application fee and paying for the cost of the sign?
Tomato, tomato.
It makes more sense to me, from what Scott was proposing, to roll it all under the application fee at one amount.
Carrie, I think it would probably be less administrative effort if we were to receive, say, it'd be more effort if you receive an application fee of $100 and then it's approved, and then you need to get another check of another whatever dollars. Whereas if you got one check that's determined each year, that's the amount of the sign. If it's approved, we keep it. If it's denied, we carry it.
It's much easier, yeah.
Because it would
That
take
makes a lot of
more
sense.
correspondence on her part. She would have to communicate at least twice just to get the second funds.
Right.
That makes sense
Yeah.
then.
And then there's a delay in
And there's a delay.
getting them. Can I say something?
Please.
Sorry. I wouldn't recommend wiping out 4 altogether.
Why is that?
I would keep the part, if a resolution to approve proposed honorary street dedication is adopted, scratch everything until close to the end. The signage will be created and installed, that way it closes out the process in the ordinance as opposed to just leaving it hanging.
Gotcha. So it would read, if a resolution to approve the proposed honorary street dedication is adopted, the signs will be created and installed by the Department of Public Works in accordance with this chapter.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Did you get that, Scott?
After the word adopted, cross out until you get
So
to.
Greg, can you look at D1? How would we change that? Cross out fee of, or cross out of 100.
With an application fee, Carrie, you know, like specific.
It shall be set from time to time by the common council. That's usually how we.
That shall be set from time by the common council. schedule.
Fee schedule takes care of it totally.
I'm just gonna make note here on my fee schedule. Would be. So I would assume then, we do the fee schedule, we vote on that, is it December or January?
Usually the first meeting in January.
Okay,
I think
So that-
maybe it's December, either way.
so that would be something that you bring forward with finance? Okay. All right.
So to clarify, because I actually had one of the folks that spoke to us approach me this weekend and asked about it. We're intending to put this up to legislative at this point, recommend it's legislative, and legislative will then vote on, or will we put this towards council? How does that work? And then what is our thinking about how long it will take to implement things? They're asking if they're hoping to have this done, they would like to apply and have it, and see if they get an answer by October when they have an alumni event.
Well, that's the other thing. We
I
put
thought
in
we
here
were-
that we're taking applications in January,
That's right.
and,
I thought we approved them that had that.
because if we do this, we didn't approve it, it was all tabled. So if we approve this, we don't have anything in the fee schedule, the fee schedule would be, have to be changed unless we come forward with, I suppose we could come forward with a change this year to the fee schedule and then have a special thing brought directly to the council. As far as this going to legislative, I mean, we can, but
I just didn't know the process.
I don't know, I mean, we can, but I don't know that we necessarily need to.
I have two committees work on it. One should bring it to council.
Yeah.
There's 4 of us here, there's 4 that it's not lacking.
I mean, I agree that normally this would go through legislative, but we kind of had it because it was thrown at us, because of quality of life piece. We didn't go into this planning on making an ordinance, but it was the right thing to do, and since we knew more about it, it made sense to keep it in this committee, so. Okay, so, anything else on this one, guys?
It's good.
We need to develop the next section.
The next,
Signage and restrictions section.
sure.
So number 5, there will be no more than one designated honoree per ward per year.
Didn't we change that?
That's why my question, and I suggested, I noticed that, should we make it 1 per year regardless of the board? So the way it's written now, you could have 8 per year. If they're good for 10 years, at any given time, you'd have 80 signs out there to be dealt with.
I thought we changed that. Didn't we change
We discussed it at great length,
that? We did.
but I thought the final thought was that we didn't think that we were really opening up a can of worms, that this, or Pandora's box, whichever one we went with, but that it's not gonna be overly used, and that if we foresee it starting, then the council can always shut it down with an amendment to this ordinance. Cause I think we originally had 2 per ward.
Because you could end up, let's say we get 1 per ward, 8 in a ward, and they're good for 10 years, yeah.
Because I know we talked about like Chestnut Street, River Street, some of the bigger streets. You put it at the beginning, you put it at the end. Is there one in the middle? I remember I had that whole conversation. Like, do you split it up and
Well, it's
So-
in there, you can't be within 2 blocks of another
right?
honoree.
So, but that's where part of the conversation was with this 1 per year.
Right. But also, if you designate somebody for a trail, walkways, trails, bicycle paths, you're gonna get the entire length of it. So,
Greg, can I ask you, if you don't mind clarifying your thinking, are you concerned about, does that number kind of concern you from a DPW standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, if there were 80 signs out there at any given time, they're unique looking signs, and they might be something that people want to take. We have a thing here about replacing them, but that's, even if they're paid for,
Still time.
it's still more time, another thing. We can't clean catch basins as it is. This is adding another
against removing the per word per year? Or per ward, leave per year?
Maybe, just to play that logic out, what if we just removed it? And it's pretty much that all of these are kind of,
Well, then there's no limit at all.
no, the council can apply the limit as they see fit. You know, they can, working with the DPW, begin to say that we're gonna limit it this year, or we're not gonna accept an application. I mean, I think that council would have more control over it.
See, I'm starting to think, remember the conversations, we want one, how we ended up with one per ward per year was because why would if the eighth ward got one, how come the fifth ward couldn't get one, or why couldn't the third ward or second ward get one? And that's how we ended up with the one ward,
Well, I think
one per year per ward.
Mark's got a point. I think the way it looks right now could actually lead to more competition of trying to get one in there for a ward versus removing it altogether. Kind of leaves it open-ended.
The challenge in all this is we just have no idea how people respond. We could get one over the next 10 years, or we could get,
Right.
8. It's a strange place to try and make something when we don't know the demand.
I kind of like to come up with a consensus between the four of us instead of leaving it to the council, because then you have 9 people giving their opinion on this, and I could go either way on it.
To Greg's point, I don't think we considered as much the impact on employees that this would have. What our thinking was is trying to kind of evenly spread, it's got to you, what you had said, evenly spread it amongst the wards, which made sense at that time, but, there's something to be said for this being an added task. So, I don't know, kind of torn in that direction as well.
Well, you guys are putting up what, 50, 55, 56 new signs for downtown Atlanta in the next couple months.
Hopefully that will last for a long time, yes, but there's always added things. Just calling out, this could be another one.
The thing that may limit it too is you look at what potentially is the first honoree. That's a big name, somebody that had a huge impact on Oleana. So that may make everybody else kind of step back and rethink any name that they were thinking they might bring forward. It may confirm that that's a good person, but it may also further limit the names a little bit. Because we don't want to just put that on anybody's name or anybody's name on any street. We would want it to be somebody that's had a huge impact on the community. Okay, I'll just say then, how about I propose that we remove number 5.
I'd second that.
All in favor? Okay. Okay, we'll strike number 5. Once this goes to council, and then we have another discussion. Okay. Do we have anything else on this one? I don't think we need to bring this back to Mr. Mersey.
Question on E, it says if this, number 4, if sign is stolen or otherwise vandalized, original applicant or designee will be required to pay for the replacement sign. Do we need to specify whatever the current cost is for the sign or current fee as established by the common council?
I think that's a safe thing to do.
So you want to refer it back to the fee schedule again? Probably
Well, it
makes
wouldn't
sense.
necessarily be the fee schedule at that point, would it? Would be just simply the cost of sign
Well, I think
replacement.
the fee schedule, in theory, that fee, as we're talking about it, if we were to know next year, would be based on the cost of the sign. However, as
Okay.
set from time to time at the council, the next council might decide, well, we need to add 50% for administration or something.
I would also add, on that point, if we're gonna go back and ask if that money might be more than what they did in year 1, I think we need to leave it up to their discretion whether they wanna do it or not. So that if they decide like, yeah, it's been 8 years, I don't really wanna pay $600 now for 2 years of this sign, we'll let it go. I think they application, how that shows.
Yeah, I was just saying, it said will be required, but it can be worded if so desired.
Google word right out of it if needed. You don't like that line?
No, you bring up a good point, because I read this and go, wouldn't it be just assumed, I don't wanna do it for Uncle John or whatever it was? But
Yeah.
then to your point, do you read this directly and that we're gonna fine them? The city staff's gonna fine
Your
those
sign's
people?
up. You got a month left, but we need $600.
So I guess we better clarify it.
Pastor will take it down again.
And then charge you another 600, so.
Okay, so just to clarify, how would this read then, Greg?
Sign is stolen or otherwise vandalized, the original applicant or designee, or we should say, and the original applicant or designee desires that it be replaced, or maybe some clearer language than that, we can wordsmith it.
Right, I think desires gives a good, that's a good way
That wiggle room on there.
of zoning in on it.
Or actually,
Okay.
They shall be required to pay the
replacement.
application
Required to pay for the
fee.
replacement?
Yeah.
Okay,
The current designated rates, whatever it is. Whatever that.
you gonna wordsmith this later for us?
Yeah, I think we can do that, Carrie.
Alright. Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. Anything else? Greg?
You still reading? Hold on, Dave.
Okay.
I still worry about the confusion it might cause, but I guess if that became a problem, we just,
What confusion?
I'll just move the name, street name, and honorary street name.
I don't think it will, because it's an honorary street sign that sits on top. The street name hasn't changed at all. And so if it's like what other cities do, it's very clear that it's not
Yeah, like
honorary.
honorary.
Yeah. So I don't think it'll be an issue.
When we print those signs, we were able to kind of control the template of the actual, I mean, we were able, if we did something that looked like a sign that could be confusing, I would say something rounded that looks very different, that could mount easily to the top or to the bottom of it, would kind of designate differently. And the white and blue, I think would be good, so hopefully it won't be a problem. Plus, truthfully, I think most people follow their phone nowadays and not street signs.
Very true. They're looking down.
And if everything goes right, I mean, the first one's gonna be up on Mark Street, so if there's any confusion, he's gonna have to deal with it anyway, so.
Mark's gonna move it,
So,
I'll see you when you
yeah.
get home. Where's my street?
So just looking ahead, are we gonna make a special exception to get that going and not make them wait?
I think we can do that. I
Next
think
year.
the first thing we have to do is get the adjustment voted in to the fee schedule.
Correct.
And then we can do it, and we can try and remember to have that conversation at council and bring everybody up to speed about the SUNY group that wanted to make that change. The soccer group, not SUNY group.
Can we just make its own resolution then to make that happen? It could be as a resolution, right? Because we're codifying the ordinance, which is good, but we could create a resolution for this individual to get it going, as long as if we follow the ordinance.
I think what we could probably do, and Dave will have to tell us if this is the way to do it, but let's say all this gets passed and we pass the changes to the fee schedule, maybe what we can do is, well, we need an application made up, which we don't have at the moment. But how long would it take to have an application? Okay, because we could have them fill out the application, submit that to Carrie, and that can come to the full council, and maybe at that point, we can deal with it. Right, in
Create
full
a
council,
resolution.
rather than even have it go to a committee for the first one.
Yeah, I don't think I'm suggesting going to the committee for it, I just think we create a resolution that goes to the council.
And have the resolution kind of follow what we just got here that we're gonna have passed.
That's the template. We
So it's
just
10
created.
years and.
Right. But I think they have to fill out the permit first, because as of right now, we don't have anything from them, so, but once we get that made,
That's something that could probably get made and just get passed and we can say, yeah, it looks good.
Did
they- Are you saying that you would-
do they want this?
Consider that before.
They would love to have it
Yeah,
October,
so we're
because
gonna
there's
wait,
some-
we're gonna
Yeah.
So you were gonna keep the January thing in there?
I think the January thing was good. I think
Yeah.
moving forward, that worked out well, because a new council coming on might not know anything about this, so then January they can talk about it, understand it, by February, we're
But
doing it.
maybe, let's say, once we have this motion on council, maybe what we wanna do during discussion, put this on the discussion agenda, talk about that group, and that we wanna have this on a regular basis in January, but they came to us months ago about this, and they wanna have an event, there's an alumni event in October, they wanna have this done then, we need to, is there any reason why we can't do this after we pass the legislation saying that we do this in January?
Immediately.
Right,
Grant exceptions.
because we don't wanna be breaking our own law, but maybe Dave can.
Well, they've been
that.
waiting on our creation of the process. We didn't have a process in place.
Right. So, no, I totally agree, I think
They've
it's
lost
a
6
matter of,
months for us to do this, so.
as long as, I think Dave Merzick can help us figure out how we can do this without breaking the brand new law that we just passed. So,
I hear him now. You're the council. You get 5 people. You can supersede anything that you pass.
you're probably right, Scott. So, okay. Neola Park 5K race course.
It has an asterisk after it. Am I not seeing the cost numbers?
I think the asterisk was for the map that was included again, where it was a little bit revised.
Yeah.
At the last meeting, we talked about reversing the course direction due to the concern about
Bottlenecking?
bottleneck. You go from a 2-lane street to a 8-foot, I think it is, wide pathway pretty quickly. So we did that. We made sure the finish line was basically where those old pit run arches are. That would be a good spot for an actual finish line. The start would be right by the CSEA memorial tree, which is by the east end of Hodges Pond, the green flag on the map. So it would just go the opposite direction, essentially. I think that works out a lot better. You've got a 2-lane road all the way down Burslorn Drive, James Jorgensen, and David Brenner Drive before you go around the loop in Catella Park. As for the estimate, I didn't send something, but I've got the number for DPW to do this in-house, which they believe they could do with our paper and our material, our purchasing materials and our labor, would be a budget of $45,000. And that is to pave the section in Catella Park that's across the grass from the end of David Brenner Drive around the loop to the existing recently paved pathway. And then would also pave the stone dust path, the dog park path that connects the existing park road to the existing paved path on the state park.
Where is that?
I should have highlighted it, but that's basically, where is our dog park? Right by the large pavilion, this large pavilion, where the little parking area there.
Yep.
So that path now is stone dust.
Okay.
We talked about, so that goes to here, go down to there, to the asphalt path.
Yeah, I zoomed in on Google, and I was questioning what that was like, so. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping, my starts racing. Just to clarify, the stone dust path would not be something that somebody in a wheelchair racer could be able to push over. That means that, she's not sure what that term is. Is it just too thick, it's not packed down hard?
It's intended to be an accessible surface. I don't have experience with that myself. Dave, I think, has a better understanding of what it's actually like to push.
Stone dust path, even if it's packed down hard, they would not be able to race on. There's so much drag on the tire, so they've got to be on a paved surface.
Right.
Not to mention it would make turning, and the turning for those, as it is, that some of these sharp turns are gonna be really tough for the wheelchair racers. But on a stone dust path, it's
Would you say,
worse.
is there a distinction between racing and normal usage? In normal usage, you're just going to the dog park, that stone dust compacted path would be okay for a stroller or a wheelchair, but my understanding of stone dust paths is that they're,
It's not, it's a lot more work for somebody in a wheelchair. And then the wheelchair racing, it's gonna be different. I mean, the wheels are cambered, they're at an angle on both sides, and plus you've got the third wheel out front. So you're talking, steerage is gonna be very different also. So they would want it, definitely on a paved surface. But we've also not consulted with anybody that does wheelchair racing either, so.
I know that the Hot Cocoa Run had expressed concern about it not being paved, and they wouldn't want to have their race in the park until you can then have, I don't know if they commit to it, but, so maybe that's a race organizer to have.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mike.
I think that to address the course, let's break this apart. I mentioned to Greg, or kind of motioned that earlier, I think the course is great. Thanks, Greg, for rethinking that. I think this works out really well. Certainly think we need to understand a little bit more whether we need to pave or whether we can clear the snow and dust. And if we need to pave, I think that's a question for council, in terms of that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I for one would not approve, I think the course looks great, but I would not approve it as the choice for moving 5K races to it unless it was
Right.
paved, just because of the wheelchair racers. Because I do know that we will never get a wheelchair racer to come to Oneonta again.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I have no problem with that. I just think it's,
Yeah.
if we're looking at the course versus then the paving. I think the course looks good, paving, if we can get that dialed in, if council wants to move in that direction, that's fine. I guess I'm supporting for moving it to council if we need to do that.
you making a motion?
I think the motion's already been made, isn't it? I mean, this is by virtue of the fact that this is on our agenda, we are considering whether that's gonna be approved or not.
Do we want to take this particular item to finance?
Could do that this week.
Yeah,
It's
'cause-
45,000.
We gotta find the money somewhere.
Maybe while we're talking about that, do we want to have a quick discussion about whether or not this is a project that you can consider spending ARPA funds on? I can just pull that up real quick if you're interested in.
Yeah, because I think we talked about that last month.
Yep.
Notes.
We can see some of the opportunities there.
I think Judy, that's what I have down, is that you suggested using the ARPA funds. Did I write that wrong?
Take the credit.
Say I'm wrong, because it was actually for the park fees. Yeah.
Okay, so we spent 83,000 on the electric, 197,000 roughly on the paved pathways that we already did. We had 235,000 budgeted for the performance stage or stages, whatever that ends up being. We had 110,500 budgeted for the Wilbur Lake Trail Bridge replacement. I forget the amount that we already expended on that to purchase the bridge. The next is to install it, so that project should hopefully come right within that budget this summer. Originally, we had talked about our basketball court relocation. I know there's a discussion on that's not a priority anymore since we're talking about going to be upgraded Wilbur Court. We have an upgraded court in Elon. We had originally had $60,000 there for that. But if you just take what we've identified so far, the things I read off, that's 625,000 out of the 713.
Okay.
So, Dave, did you just say that we haven't talked to anybody that's a wheelchair racer yet?
We have.
Maybe we should talk to a few folks before.
I mean, I would suggest talking to them about the turns, whether they can make these turns. As far as the paving goes, I mean, just my knowledge between between racing and knowing, what I know from what I do, it would have to be paved. The question would come down to, can they do the sharp turns like this? Or would this make for a really slow race for them? I just don't know. I mean, I'm looking from 10,000 feet up on the course.
Can we try to get that answer before we decide the funding aspect? Because if we do all this and all of a sudden they come back saying, yeah, no, this
I'm never
course
gonna
isn't
go.
gonna make it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm just listening to your hesitation. I'd rather talk to at least 2 or 3 people that are wheelchair racers before we spend the money and only find out after the fact that it doesn't really work for them.
Trying to think how we would find a wheelchair racer.
There's gotta be a place out there, cause this is quite common, having the, ADA might be a good place to start, somebody that's involved with that.
Or you say you do a lot of road races, Dave, right? Wouldn't it just be
Not anymore, unfortunately.
contact some of those folks that put those races on, they would know?
Greg's suggestion, maybe the organizers themselves are the ones that would.
Right, that's what I'm trying to get at, is those folks.
Well, we have, who does the Hot Cocoa 5K? And who was the last organizer of Pit Run?
Is it the archive too, does Hot Cocoa?
Oh.
I think I would start there, because they're the ones that mentioned specifically that they wouldn't do this course if it were not really paved, so I think they probably have a good idea.
Okay. The difference with it, if they don't have any answer about the actual turnage,
I would probably ask Frank Russo.
because the Pit Run was also affiliated with United States Track and Field. And I'm trying to think of the circuit that was part of it. I think it was out of Utica. But they would have contact information for USATF to maybe have contact through there for somebody to speak to. But let's start with our,
Dave, Wounded Warrior might have somebody too, that you can talk to.
What is that?
Wounded Warrior program, they help out, disabled vets.
Yeah, but who runs that?
I'd have to look.
Didn't we have an event here recently?
Cause yeah, they just had one, what was it, like a softball game or something like that?
Wounded Warriors, there's a golf tournament, 2-day golf tournament that raises a substantial amount of money for Wounded Warriors.
Yeah, cause they might have somebody that they can at least get you in contact with as well.
that does road racing
Yeah.
or wheelchair racing, yeah. Okay, so what do we want? Do we want to hold off until we get this answer then before we send this to?
I would feel more comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, I just was trying to keep it moving along, cause I think it's a good idea, but I understand trying to speak to people and support that.
I'd just like to make sure we do it right.
Yep.
That's what I wanna, make sure we're doing it.
Yeah, I kind of assumed we might be able to get answers back by the time we got to finance, but if we're talking, trying to contact all these organizations and talk to wheelchair folks, I don't think we'll be able to do it. If we're talking to the organizers from one of the races, that's different, but.
As far as the ARPA discussion, whether that, I can obviously wait for finance or for council, but is that something that you would consider? I mean, or is there another discussion generally about ARPA? How do we want to spend the remainder of the funds?
I would agree to using ARPA funds to do this, if this is what we decide if we decide this is gonna work, then yeah, absolutely.
I guess if you look at it, the ARPA funds opened up the situation in the first place, right? Because of some of the mill race being paid with ARPA funds. So if the ARPA funds just complete this and we have a 5K that, a lot of folks can participate in, then that was money well used and it might really help the city in different ways.
I mean, I know I've heard quite a few comments from different people in the public about how nice the walkways are. Anyways, it seems like they're really well utilized. I don't know if you've heard the same.
How wide will this path be?
I think it's 8 foot wide along Catella now, 8 or 10, I think it's 8, so it'll be the same. And I think it's about 8 foot wide on the, by the dog park as well. be sections that are already paved that are narrower than that, I think we just have to.
I think there's a good distance before it would, since it's on the road, before it would narrow down, that it would thin out the field enough. If we wouldn't be able to start it on a bike path or on an 8-foot path though. So, and I think that if we suddenly had lots of wheelchair racers for any reason, they would know ahead of time looking at the course that they'd have to be strategic about when they would pass somebody. So. Give me just a second. If you could let us know what you find out from the Hockopa 5K organizers, Greg, and if that's not going to give us the information that we need, then I can work with you about getting in touch with USATF, unless we have a local number for Wounded Warriors. Either
I can
one.
research and find it, I'm sure. I'll do my best, let's put it that way.
All right. Okay. Do we have anything else on that for now? Okay. All right, Main Street closures for events, guidelines for approval.
Everyone get a chance to see those?
Yes.
I guess I just wanna clarify one thing, the full lane for emergency vehicles, are we talking about a lane of the road or a pathway? I'm just trying to think about events where they're on both sides.
As long as there's a 10-foot clear path, whether it's
Okay.
this side, the middle, or that side, I think it's been approved, I think, the event in the past.
Right.
Yeah, 'cause I had a question about that also. So that is, you're still allowing them to be on either side into those parking areas, and as long as they provide 10 feet,
Yeah,
relatively straight, so that the apparatus isn't going.
Yeah, yeah, you might have, I think, snowing as an example, where the tents are to kind of one side, there's enough room on one of the lanes to get through. As long as, I mean, again, these are guidelines, minimum 10-foot wide, but ultimately, for any event, the fire chiefs are going to be reviewing the plan and to be comfortable with it. So, yeah, this satisfies the requirement.
Okay.
We haven't had any problems. I mean, one time there was maybe a proposal to block that and work through it, so there's been no event that's been turned down because of this requirement.
Right.
And then who is in charge of quantifying the 1,000 persons? Is it
So-
the event holder or?
Yeah, and again, I guess when I use the term guidelines, I use that intentionally, so as, you know, we're not gonna require them to document proof of, you know, passing that threshold, but I think it's sort of a general guideline. I mean, in a first-time event, you don't know what they're actually gonna get. You might get a sense, but the council might get a sense from the applicant or ask them to provide whatever information you want to get the sense. Is this going to be an event that draws 1,000, or is this really not realistic?
Right.
And then the second time around, hopefully one of the council members or someone is on city staff, someone will be able to give some objective feedback in addition to what the organizer gives as to whether it was successful. I think the idea of developing, which we didn't define what that means, but we could talk about how do we get feedback from businesses downtown, not just from 8 or 9 of them, but from more, and really get a sense of whether it was a net benefit or not, or a net negative.
Didn't we talk about a survey job there?
Yeah, but specifically what that is, how it goes out, who does it, I would think that would be something we might have input into and maybe develop that for the applicant to then, or the organizer, okay, if you wanna continue to have your event,
You follow up with them directly and develop the relationship and not add another task to somebody's plate.
So their post-event analysis will include a survey that's gonna be designed by the city staff to.
It could, that's not what this says right now, I mean, we can talk.
No, I think that's good though. Isn't that good feedback for them also?
I mean, I know surveys are difficult to get people to respond to, and you want to get across
survey or a link to a survey on the city website.
Yeah, I think that's pretty easy. It might make sense, we can talk about it more, I have not thought about this or talked about it with staff, but like what specific questions are we asking? Is it on an event by event basis, or are they just generic, questions? That's 5 or 6, it's easy, and it's a standard form, so like from one event to the next, we'll have sort of a standard metric to compare. I don't know what those would be exactly, but I'm sure we can figure something out. Okay. And yeah, to answer your question, it's pretty easy to put.
I just wanted to add that online would be good, but trying to ask us or the event organizers to do a survey is difficult because we don't have addresses for all the businesses. We don't have a log, we don't know, and they change and they rent, they don't necessarily own the building. So a survey for downtown is basically you walk from business to business to drop it off. So doing it online probably is the best way, but I doubt we'd get a really good response rate. So maybe it's something that we could do like maybe once a year. People get used to doing it for a number, for whatever happened that summer, maybe. And so they can gauge, they can rank whatever happened, or they can give feedback once rather than put that burden on the event organizers. And maybe something like DO can continue to do because they've done it a couple times, and they have contacts with all the businesses on the street pretty much.
Yeah, my fear is that we would have people that fill out those are typically, or I should say it this way, if you're in a high emotional state, you're more likely to fill out the surveys than if you're not. So, and you're more likely to have people that are really angry about it and that their business didn't do well, or somebody that had a tremendous day. So I wouldn't want to just get the extremes. I would want to get the sense of what everybody thought, because otherwise it's really not that helpful. So.
Right, but I hear what you're saying about doing it at the end, and I don't want to add any more work to the city staff. But the businesses might misremember an event to an event to an event, because we're doing them once a month. And so if we're asking for 4 or 5 months worth of remembrance,
Right.
I wouldn't want an event to be pinned down for something that they actually weren't responsible for.
I just, getting them to answer once
Is a struggle.
getting them to answer, 5
5
times.
times can be.
So I'm not trying to be negative here. It's just surveys are always hard to get good data, to get enough responses back to make the data really valuable. So I'm not saying not to do it, but I'm just trying to figure out what is a good way to do it.
I like the digital, and I like the simplicity of it. If you could just keep it to, did you have an overall positive effect? Did you have an overall negative effect? If you feel like you want to explain beyond that, here's the extra box. I wouldn't want to ask them monetarily. I don't think that's necessary. You're just trying to, your body language told it all. You're either emotionally negative or you're emotionally positive, how that event treated your business.
But the other thing to think about, Len, too, is these businesses should know monetarily whether they did well, because they should be keeping records. I mean, I would if I had a business on Main Street. I'd keep good records so I know week to week or even day to day how well I did. So they should be able to go back. If we decide to let DO do this at the end of the year, they should be able to go back and see, okay, on this date I did well, this date was a horrible day. But we could also do we want to solve this issue today if we're looking at passing guidelines, or do we want to allow the city and DO to work something out in the future? And meanwhile, we push forward these guidelines here.
Well, I suggest don't hone in on the monetarily, because retail, the purchase isn't always made at that first point of contact. They might have saw the item in the store and said, oh, look at that, I didn't know that was there. and then they come back at another time.
You're talking more foot traffic in the store.
Foot traffic means a lot to a business, not always.
Yep.
You plant that seed, they saw the item, they come back another day. Well,
I think
But
we
the-
have to work, to try to let the businesses know, hey, we're trying to work with you with these closures. We really kinda need this feedback. It kinda, we really need this. So we know if what we're passing up here on legislative as a council is really helping, hurting, or not really making much of a difference, So we're invested, they're invested. I think we gotta get that point across somehow. I don't think we're gonna solve that tonight, but I think we're probably good to move this forward. It's a starting point. We can always tweak it as we go.
Well, I think the look of how we get feedback is something that can be solved later. In the meantime, I think having a general guideline that this is what we're gonna do is a good idea. How we do that, we can figure that out.
I think that maybe we can get the mayor and Emily to go down Main Street and let them know that that's what we're working towards. I think it'd be more coming from both the mayor and that representative.
Ginny?
I just wanted to tell you, at NICOM, when I go to different training schools, they have an evaluation form that you fill out just before you leave, after the class is ended. And I don't know if we could have evaluation forms for each day it's closed, and then they fill them out and drop them in the mail.
This would be for the businesses
Yeah.
along Main Street, so
Yeah.
they're not necessarily attending the event to get that. So, yeah, I don't know, like.
They'd have to be,
that'd
somebody
be
would
good
have
for
to
the
go and drop them off.
participants, But, yeah, somebody'd have to go probably to drop them off.
Yep.
Yeah, cause I was thinking that too, but that, again, you've gotta get it into the business's hands that are open that day.
Okay. Well, how the look of how this is done, we can discuss
Yep.
later. Do we have any other additions, subtractions from the guidelines? Any other questions about the guidelines that are on here? We good for pushing this forward to the council?
So, am I not seeing any mention about, or is it just accepted that they have to follow the Department of Health requirements for Johns?
For what? I'm
For
sorry.
Johns?
I think probably the fourth bullet, provide all amenities, accommodations, insurance, et cetera, as required by the city, and that would be lumped in with that. And I guess, question I would have, you're talking about pushing it forward, is this something that you would see the council adopting? I mean, or is it just if the council discusses it, do I issue this as a policy, like as far as internally among staff, and you just go for it next time the event comes up, before you know, here are the guidelines, and then if there's changes that need to be made at some point, it's not a matter of.
I think this would be more of a policy, now that you've mentioned that. I don't think, if anything, we would do a resolution, but that seems overkill with this. But I think it should be on the discussion agenda for future policy.
And I think ultimately the council can approve or deny any event for reasons listed here or otherwise. So this would be more just a guideline for how staff is communicating with the event organizers, like this is what you need to provide and be prepared to provide, unless the council might say no.
And it's also a guideline for the council to take a look at the previous year event to see how it actually did.
Yeah, I agree with putting it as a discussion and then just say, yeah, we kind of like having the guidelines for both us and city staff, so we're on the same page.
I'll bring it to council discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. State Street and Hazel Street traffic patterns and speeds. I was wondering if we needed the police chief here for this part of the discussion or not. Greg, what are your thoughts on this?
Not necessarily. I mean, we could follow up with him if there are specific questions. Generally, both this one and Spruce Street, there was nothing out of the ordinary from what we would expect to see on these types of side streets as far as average speeds, 85th percentiles and outliers. You're looking at Hazel Street, I mean, if you look at page 4 of that PDF, that's really where you wanna look.
And I'm assuming this is 325 Hazel Street, but I don't think Hazel Street has 35, does it?
Yeah, let's look at it too, figure it out.
That could be,
Doesn't have what? I'm sorry.
I don't think it goes as high as 35. It's a small street, runs from State to west, or east. But either way, I'm assuming it was 3 to 5. I was trying to understand, it says facing northeast, so it's just, for me, it was trying to understand the approaching and the receding, obviously one way or
it's a
the
little
other.
confusing.
So I was like, well, is the receding, is that coming from the high school or going down the hill?
If you're facing northeast, so you're facing, if you're on Hazel Street, kind of facing the high school, approaching the device and then receding from the device. So approaching would be like southbound. Or no, I'm sorry. Approaching would be southbound, receding would be northbound.
So we're going to the high school faster than we're leaving the high school?
That's what I was thinking when I was reading it.
I just wanted to
confirm that. Yeah, same here.
Because I was trying to understand the directions, because I got to Google Map and I looked.
Yeah, it's a little.
Which is not what I was expecting though.
No, because the way the conversation was last month, it sounded like people were going faster towards State Street than away from it.
Just see what 3 spot is.
They're excited about going to school.
Oh my God, I'm gonna be late. That's what it is.
Yeah, this, right, I mean, this evidence pretty much shows us that's not the case, right, but it's interesting. One of the things we were wondering was, there seem to be more students in Suno-Niente using their lower parking lots. They're filled all the time now. Past years they weren't. Are these students also, blaming on the students, it sounds terrible, but are they the ones that are kind of shooting, up to school? I mean, it's hard to know who this is and what's going on. I guess I'll say that I was surprised at the volume. I didn't think the volume would be quite as high as it was for
Yeah.
a little street that should be kind of an out-of-the-way street tucked, tucked off to the side of East Street, which I would expect, greater amount of volume.
Cause that's,
Greg's doing the mathematics really quickly.
321 cars per day.
over 7 days?
Yeah. So I was surprised by that. So regardless of the speed, I think that the neighbors feel the pinch of more people coming through. Generally think that they're going faster. I think the evidence shows that certainly there are those that are following the speed limit. The average are following the speed limit. In fact, the average are going quite below the speed
40,
limit.
45 miles per hour though on that small
Right,
street.
there's some
It
small
seems
ones.
really fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the next page, it'll tell you, break down grouping by 5 mile per hour speed, how many we're doing. So approaching 2, we're going more than 30 miles per hour. Receding volume, you had 38 going between 31 and 35, 1 that went 36 to 40, and 2 that went 41 to 45. So
Right.
a very small number of cars that are significantly exceeding the speed limit, much less, or more so than the average or median. I mean, when you look at 85th percentile is what I look at when you're looking at, if you're trying to determine what a speed limit should be on a street, what standard engineering practice will tell you to look at the 85th percentile, and that's what the speed limit should be. I tend to look at it a little bit differently. You design the road to be what speed you would like it to be. So if you design the road that you want it to be 19 or 20 miles per hour, 85th percentile, you design it in such a way that that's the result you get, and then you verify the result to see if it worked. So if you were to make changes here, I mean, why are we talking about this? We're trying to determine if there's any changes needed. If you would make a change, what is your goal? Because you're probably not going to do much that's going to reduce the 85th percentile below 19. Maybe in the receding traffic, you might do something to reduce the total volume of traffic on the road, making it a dead end or a one-way, or adding speed humps, something like that that's gonna make it less attractive as a shortcut or as a cut through, or, you know, not allowed as a cut through. But I guess the question is then, is that warranted? And that's not a black and white answer
So
necessarily.
we can't have speed humps anyway, that's what you've told us in the past.
No, you can have speed humps, it's, you know, you can't have the speed bump like you have in the over, you used to have in the over car, you can have a longer thing, it's more easily traversable, it doesn't cause an accident, you can't have those.
They have speed humps throughout downtown Rochester in neighborhoods to slow traffic down, and it works. Cause that's gone down the road. I wanna go faster and I can't.
Clarity here, there's a difference between a speed bump and a speed hump.
Think of it, a hump is like what we typically think of as a speed bump.
Oh,
Or no, a speed bump is like what we typically think as a speed bump.
Like it's
A
really
hump
this
is,
wide.
it's more like this wide where it's more gradual and then up.
And that's a bump or is that a hump?
That's a hump. Yeah.
Sorry.
I
Hump
know.
is more abrupt.
Okay, so
Hump
be
is
abrupt,
more-
okay.
Didn't you refer to like speed ramps you had? I thought you had another.
There's a speed table,
Speed
which
table,
is
that's
just like, you go up and then you're on a flat table and you come down like at a crosswalk.
Oh, maybe that's what they use.
It might be, but at a crosswalk, that's what we're proposing on River Street, at a couple locations, is a speed table where you would have a flat section, so you don't have a curb ramp. If you're crossing the street, you go straight across, the car goes up and down. Yeah. There are other things you look at too that are more like chains or you force horizontal movement, but I mean, realistically, if you wanted to limit the amount of through traffic, it would probably be making it either one way, probably coming southbound because that appears to be less popular of a speed cut through, or you would have something like a gate like you have on Woodside or a dead end where now only local traffic is gonna take that street because no one else has a reason to. But is it, you know, you're reducing some of the local traffic's, you know, ease of getting around, and is it worth whatever the cost is for the result that you're trying to attain?
There hasn't been any motor vehicle crashes on Hazel?
Not that I'm aware of, I don't know that the police did a review of that. I'd have to check.
No, I would be interested, has there been a motor vehicle crash at the intersection of Hazel and East? Before we went to that extreme of putting a one-way street in, because you're affecting quite a few neighbors.
Well, the other question was, is the school zone, is that able to be designated a school zone
On Hazel,
on state?
No, by Bugby, is what we were talking
I
about.
apologize, I didn't follow up on that.
No worries.
Specifically.
But I think that's part of the thinking as well. I mean, right, if we're looking at ways to kind of calm the traffic, or slow the traffic, that might be one that we could easily enact without needing to go down the road of putting humps and bumps or tables on the road. And the other thing, and this is, you know, I know you know this, but it's the weird inconsistency where you have 35 and 25 within a few feet from one another. I was actually gonna try to see if I could get into the same picture, it would be fun, but, you know, I think if when we do our review of everything, maybe change the speed limits, that can help as well in general, but.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go back to the idea that a speed limit change won't make a big effect, or have a big effect on.
Right.
It might create more non-compliance and then a greater need for enforcement, which is obviously dependent on resources and so forth. But if there's a physical change, whether that's narrowing the street or whatever that might be, that's gonna have a bigger effect on action.
Right.
Like, so if you were to make a 25-mile-an-hour speed zone on, we didn't do the speed study on State Street, but let's assume that they're the same as Hazel or similar.
To put in a 25-mile-per-hour speed limit, when
The average car, 85th percentile, is going 19 or 23.
I understand.
There's only a few, and they're probably
But
going to
does-
violate anyway.
Does it tweak perception does a speed change tweak perception of ease of moving through? So I mean, is it another volume question? Speed's perhaps a volume answer. So now I know they just changed the speed limit, I need to go slower there, might as well go onto E Street. Or or does that not impact drivers? If we already have most of the people who are in that percentile already going slow, is that not gonna change things at all in terms of the perception of the route?
It's hard to say, I mean, probably depends on the driver, and I would guess it wouldn't have a appreciable impact. The other thing that I would say that as we do our study citywide, over time, systematic study of speed limits, and with the new state law, we'll be able to reduce the citywide speed limit if we want to, 25 miles per hour, with exceptions of like 30. For the most part, all of these side streets are very similar, where the average, or the 80% of it actually less than 25, so it would justify setting the speed limit 25. So at that point, then Hazel and State wouldn't be, but wouldn't really be an exception for the norm.
Right. Well, I mean, I'd be happy to take a lot of these questions back to the Hazel Street residents and talk to them and get their feedback if we're looking to explore tables or humps and see whether those are possibilities or not. What you all want to do.
Well, I mean, we've talked about, for years, we've talked about doing various types of bumps or cables or whatever to slow traffic down. I would be hesitant to change this to a one-way, because I'm guessing that the residents will not like it.
The thing is, with the one-way, you can easily, with a dead end, you can easily test that out with very little cost. You just go put some barricades up and leave them there for a week or two, tell the residents to report back their disdain or pleasure or whatever observations. You could do the same thing with a speed hump if you bought a temporary one, although those are expensive and not that easy to install. We looked at doing that; they're like $10,000 a piece. One way you could change the signage, although that's a little bit more difficult because I guess either way with a one way or a dead end, you're gonna have cars that are gonna wind up confused what happened, why is this changing, it's temporary, but you could consider something like that.
Well, as somebody that lives on a one-way street, I know that it doesn't slow speeders at all. It also doesn't slow people from going both directions. So it's not necessarily a solution.
I'm sure you've never done that.
What's that?
I'm sure you've never done that.
Gone the wrong direction? No, I haven't.
I'm impressed.
Because I sit in my living room and I see people going 30 miles an hour the wrong way down my street, and I'm just waiting for the collision to happen on the corner of State and Normal.
You go back and back down the street counts as going the wrong way.
Be quiet over that.
So, Greg, I just wanted a little more clarity. So you're determining the receding traffic is headed away from State?
Let me just make sure. So it says that the study location, the device is facing northeast, so toward the high school. So as traffic is approaching that is heading south. As traffic is receding away from the device, that's heading north.
So it's headed towards high school.
Receding.
Yeah. Okay, so what do we want to do with this?
Well, because if you turn to page 16 out of the 17, to your point of the 85th percentile, and you look at the times, these are broken down into 5-hour increments. If you were suggesting on one-ways or some kind of lane change, you can see a pattern.
But these are the 85th percentile speeds.
And that's
Okay.
what Greg said that you hone in on, it's 85th, to see if there's somewhere that you can tweak. There's kind of a pattern there, based on the fact that like at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's pretty consistent.
We're going to break this down by day on this. saying that at 2 in the morning, the receding speeds are the 85th percentile is higher?
Even the approaching and the receding are pretty much 20 miles an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning. But also, I was looking at, so it starts off on April 3rd, which is a Monday. And then if you go to Sunday the 9th, what's interesting at 8 o'clock at night, on the 9th, at 8:35,
That's in the morning usually.
it says 2020,
Oh,
it says 2035.
Yeah, right.
On the 9th, the receding is close to 25, yeah. So it's spiking different than the approaching, so. I don't know, I agree that if you move to one-way traffic, that would be the last resort. Because you're really impacting people. And that gate that's been on Woodside, boy, that's been there for a really long time. I think that was up in the beginning of my career, so. I don't know if they had motor vehicle crashes, I don't know what made them.
I think people cutting through, people cutting through, probably same complaint, speeding and volume.
And to Mark's point, it's not maybe necessarily the speed, it's the volume. I was shocked at how much traffic is hitting Hazel Street. That's a lot of traffic.
Well, I mean, we could put this back to what Mark was suggesting, that he could go and talk to the residents about options. But this is also an issue that's not just on that street alone. I think there's a number of streets where we have this issue.
Well, let's just look at
Maybe, yeah.
I mean, Spruce Street's got some high mileage too.
Speeds,
Yeah, high speeds.
So, right, to that point, and not the one that's Spruce Street, but that, maybe we do need to think about a little more about the tables and how we might use them. If we use them, what's appropriate, where is appropriate use, and I also like them at the cost. I don't wanna, dump a whole bunch of costs on the city, but I think we know that we've got these problems throughout the city, volume issues, and of course, I don't know about you all, but I was shocked to see the top speed on Spruce.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, there's some ways that we could think about these, and think about them not just in these isolated, instances, but how we might wanna think about them collectively across the city.
Because wherever we decide, if we decide to build these bumps or tables, whatever we want to call them, that's going to force a lot of this traffic off of that street. So maybe we want to do it strategically, like you're saying, to try to bottle it onto streets like East Street, West Street, Center Street, that can handle the traffic, that are designed to handle the traffic.
I don't think we should look at it street by street. I think we should look at, what Greg would probably look at is a total traffic pattern system.
We call it the development of a complete streets plan. We have complete streets policy now, and it says that we look at these sort of things as we go along, but rather than, we're doing Gardner Place, let's talk about whether we should do something here, or, somebody complained on Hazel Street or Spruce Street, maybe start looking at it, systematically.
Yeah, citywide, right?
Citywide.
Is that something that would be a staff project, or is that something that needs to be a task force, you say that, or, type of project?
I think it's more of a staff, I think at some point we would probably engage a consultant. I don't think, my initial thoughts, I was having some conversations with Chris, and thinking about myself, I don't think we would wanna say, okay, we're gonna develop a complete streets plan, let's hire a consultant, this is a project, we're gonna start, and we're gonna finish, and we're gonna have a plan, and it's gonna be done. I think it's sort of an iterative process, and it's something that maybe is done over time, and where a consultant could help would be in certain instances. that's something you'd like us to think more about, I think I could talk more with Chris and Judy as well and talk about how we might, and others, and Chief Wissenberg.
Well, would that be coupled with, speed limit analysis and kind of all?
I think so, yeah, because, I think one of our first tasks would be trying to figure out what are we trying to accomplish? Are we looking for problems, or are we trying to, be strategic in how we're developing the city? There are areas that don't have sidewalks that should have them, or poorly maintained sidewalks. There are probably neighborhoods you can identify that, maybe this is an area we want to focus on to encourage lower speeds. Maybe we want to come up with some criteria to figure out, do we want a 20 mile per hour 85th percentile speed here, or are we okay with a 35 or a 30 mile an hour? Or do we want 15, or, there's a lot of thought that goes into it, but I do think that going about it in a systematic citywide way is the way to go.
So I guess since I brought this forward, what I would love to see, if we can, certainly you let us know, school sign that zone. I think that would be at least, there was a whole bunch of kind of concerns that were all wrapped up, but that would at least address one of them, and potentially at least maybe lighten a little bit the load. But I would be in support of looking at this comprehensively. I think we've already, at least over the past, year, identified a number of streets we know are problematic. We can begin kind of thinking about some of those, but beginning to think about them in relation to others. But yeah, I think there's a lot of value in having kind of a deep dive analysis with the kind of plan that we're going to enact things and how we do that. Because it's interesting to me what little nuanced differences, like, here we are, 3 years into this, and this has just come up as an issue because it just became an issue. And I'm not sure what changed to make it an issue. I don't think the volume was like this 2 years ago. So I'm not sure what the change is, but it's interesting to me how nuanced traffic can be.
We may find that this issue has been there, because I think about that street a few years back. There was an accident in Joe Bernier's house. You know what I'm talking about, but I don't know what
It had
happened.
nothing to do with the traffic pattern.
No? Okay, never mind then.
You're talking about the car in the house?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
That was
never
my
mind
crew.
then.
That was my crew.
Okay, so as far as the school zone, do you want to hold off on asking Greg to research whether a school zone could be implemented in that area and let that be incorporated into the discussion with?
No, I'm suggesting, sorry Greg, but understanding whether we could or not put a school zone there, if we can, because as a school, if we could put a school zone, would maybe go some way and kind of maybe calming things now, and then we can begin to do the complete street study on things. But I don't want this to be a, hours-long task of figuring this out or not. I just didn't, it's a pre-K school. I don't know what the rules are about a school zone.
Well, we have it at Center Street, and Center Street is
No,
pre-K.
that might be left over from a time when it really was.
I'm not so sure.
Okay.
So I'll be interested to hear what you find out.
Yeah, I'd rather be proactive than reactive.
And I will say that now that I drive just drove tonight, just about the time that parents were coming out, it can be really easy to go very quickly down that road, and because it's turning on State Street and it's blind, not blind, but if you're going quickly, it would be really blind, especially for kids that might be coming out of school, getting into their parents' cars. If they were to do, something right to the street, it could be problematic. So I think it would be, for a lot of reasons, really good to think about that being slow.
Well, I think people come racing up Maple Street, there's no stop sign there. They make the right on the State and come whipping around to the corner of Hickey.
Blow through that stop sign.
Sometimes they do, yeah.
Absolutely.
Because there's no stop sign if you're coming up Hickey Street onto State Street.
Right. Yeah.
So,
It's confusing there.
okay,
If I could really
Sure.
quickly, I just want to make sure I publicly thank Chief Wissenberg for following up on this and putting this together, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thanks Greg for rolling the ball on this. This helps me to go back and have conversations with the folks on that street and let them know some of the information as well as what we're looking
keep this on our agenda for next time, just as a follow-up, to see where we are with it. Everybody okay with that? Do we need to continue the discussion with Spruce Street, or can we, have we said enough about citywide speeding? I think we included it, sort of.
Can we just again point out one direction 56 and one direction 63?
Yeah.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, some of the questions that have been asked, I'm sorry, Len.
83 miles an hour on Chestnut.
83?
Correct.
I like to see River Streets, cause I know that's the east way.
I wanna see the, if I can get a chance, I'd like to see the report on Chestnut Street. I just heard about it
I'm trying to remember when we last did that.
last year. Yeah.
Where did they put that, remember? Right next?
Nope, it was supposed to be on a straight stretch there.
Oh, east, closer
You know,
downtown?
the roof, the building, the roof was collapsing in, where we had the, cold,
Oh, okay.
it was kitty corner to that.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, average was 38, highest was 83.
And that's 35, right?
Mm-hmm.
30.
30.
It's 30.
And the
And
average
we
is
have,
38.
and we have, a sign that tells you how
Right,
fast you're
yeah,
going,
Yep.
so.
Maybe they're trying to
Yeah,
break a record.
I think, I think it doesn't matter what the study we're gonna do on what street, is we're gonna find that by and large, most people go, well, maybe that's the exception you just mentioned, but by and large, most people are gonna go the speed limit, but then there's those exceptions that are just concerning, so.
How about the cars?
The average speed was 38, Mark.
No, I said that's the exception.
Yeah,
so
that's what's
Right.
concerning.
Yeah,
The
and
cars
these
that
averages were
pass on
still,
Main Street.
What's that, Judy?
How about the cars that pass cars on Main Street?
Oh, yeah.
Right, the strip,
oh, right,
Right
I've seen
now.
that,
Yeah.
it's insane.
they don't
No.
care.
No regards, they'll just drive right around.
People all over the
You're not
streets,
supposed to
they
do that.
don't care. Passing cars on Main Street, shocking,
Wow.
I think.
So yeah, the average and median were 21 and 22 approaching, and 20 and 21 receding, so reasonable. 38 is not
Yeah.
reasonable, as the average.
Yeah, I mean, 28 is the 85th percentile in both directions would indicate that 30 miles per hour is an appropriate speed limit. The way it's Spruce Street that section is right now. But
How many
you
of
can
these
change
de-
that with design, stop sign, speed hump, whatever.
How many of these devices do you have, Greg? Just the one?
Just, yeah, so they typically do it a week at a time.
Maybe we can have an investment to get more than one.
We have one official item left on the agenda and two old items that were not added to the agenda that I think we need to have discussions about. But we've been going for over 2 hours and I can tell people are tired. Anybody object to tabling these items? So moved.
Just real quick.
Oh.
Did we, I can't remember exactly, are we kind of time sensitive on the,
Oh, community events programming.
programming, do you want to just give a quick update on that?
Do we have to do anything?
I don't know if we have to, I think we just kind of want to give an update. We met with DO, David Kropp, and talked about 2023 events, and the Main Street, Meet Me on Main Street closures, I think, you know, our opinion and from the feedback we've heard, by and large, they were not well attended last year. I think during COVID, they certainly were, and it's kind of fallen off. And I think if they're not tied with an actual event, if there's just Meet Me on Main Street, it's not really worth it. It's not bringing that 1,000 people down to Main Street like our guidelines are trying to go for. If it's tied with a basketball event or with Snowmagang or whatever, something like that, you know, that kind of meets the guidelines. So we kind of agree we're not going to do those separate Meet Me on Main Street closures, and we're going to talk about how else we could utilize that money. There's not a ton of money that's budgeted for those. I mean, I think we're hiring a band to come. You know, there's a couple $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000 in their budget for that. One of the things we did talk about, and I think the mayor did check with Ben Gunther, and they was going to coordinate with the farmers market May 13th was intended to be their first Main Street closure downtown, so since we're not doing that, David was wondering if the vendors he's been coordinating with, food vendors and such, might be able to partner with the farmer's market and just add to that event on that particular Saturday, so that might happen. It sounds like there was some positive.
So the farmer's market wanna go back up to Main Street? Is that what you're talking about?
You know, down at where it is.
Down.
It'd be like 18 craft type vendors and other vendors that were already planned for that day, might be able to go down and join at the farmer's market.
I'm sorry, but
one
which day are we talking? The-
May 13th.
Saturday, May 13th.
That was going to be a Meet Me on Main Street event?
Yeah,
Yes.
it had been.
So they already had like 18 vendors signing up for it. So rather than just end that with them, they're looking into whether they can join down at where the farmer's market is on that Saturday.
So that was pretty much it. We just wanted to make sure that you're aware of that. Obviously, there's the other events. They already did the Easter Bunny event. They had over 300 people. That's only about a $300 expense. They're talking about this year maybe doing a movie night in conjunction with the city's movie night.
Yeah.
So there'll be 2 of them, and maybe in the summer. I think last year Dio did theirs in the spring, or it was a little colder out, didn't go that well. Ours went really well, so we're gonna do the both. I forget if there's probably not dates picked yet.
There are dates for the first one. It's the first Thursday in June after school closes. 29th, stuck in my head.
Bloom Fest is obviously still a thing that they're going to be doing. The Harvest Party, they said last year they had 500 plus attendees. They intend to do that again. David had mentioned the laser tag that they had last year. They brought in a group that puts on laser tag for a fee, and that was really popular, so they're going to try to do that again. Obviously the Halloween trick or treat and parade they're involved with, and all the holiday stuff in the winter. Tree lighting parade, Santa, gingerbread jubilee, and the festival of trees.
Are they posting all this on their website?
Yeah, I'm not writing these all down.
No, that's okay. I mean, yeah, I mean, as these events are being announced, they're putting them out there. It's just.
Thank you.
Is that all we need to?
Cooperstown All-Star Village. So, our marketing, one of the 3 marketing committees, the one that Katie LaPerry leads, I never can remember the name of it, I'm sorry. But we just had a meeting last week, and we plan to have our city booth at the opening day of Cooperstown All-Star Village, which happens every 6 days throughout the summer. I think there's 12 of them. Yeah, so we're working to get the schedule from them so we can figure out some of our marketing ideas around that schedule to get businesses in and stuff. DO, with this little bit of money that is under 2,000, I think, that's freeing up because of the not having the street closures. We've suggested to David that they could help us possibly with that booth, and so he went back to his board. They're interested, so we're going to be doing some more talking with them about how they can help us, maybe volunteers to help us man it, and some of the handouts. Basically what we'd like to do is have some kind of digital presence, like on our landing page, so that we can just pass out a QR code or have a QR code there that they can just click with their phone, so we don't have to have a handout necessarily. And that would link to whatever the businesses are offering, whether it's promotions, discounts, maybe, this is something I was thinking of, maybe they could do mini kid camps throughout the summer for those kids, and if not this year, maybe they can get geared up for next year and beyond. So anyway, we're working on that, and DO is gonna be some part of that through their contract that we have with them. And that's an awesome opportunity. We can hit thousands of people.
Yeah.
And we get more foot traffic downtown.
Yeah, I think it's really cool.
The QR code though, that's a great idea, instead of trying to throw paper out at somebody.
Yeah. We're also checking with Tracy, don't know her last name, at Cooperstown All-Star Village. She's on the committee. She wasn't there at that meeting though, she couldn't make it, but we're checking with her about how the city can tag on with what they're offering digitally at the Cooperstown All-Star Village, so maybe we don't actually have to have our own landing page quite yet, because it's not ready. So we're gonna try to take advantage of as much as we can that they're already doing, and then build from there. Because, you know, we don't have a lot of resources, but I think it's gonna be really exciting. And Gary Lang is on the committee, so he's awesome, and he'll be really good over there in that booth to get people here, so,
Great.
yeah.
Thanks, Judy.
Is that the reason why you stayed this entire time? Because if that is, we should have made sure you got ahead.
It's okay, I was listening to the other stuff, so no
Sorry,
problem,
Judy.
but it's all right.
Well, on that note.
We should, well, maybe